Okay, my good friends, Roger, Mudfossil University, a eureka moment. I've been talking about no neutrons, and there is only positives and negatives. They both weigh the same amount, and you build nucleuses this way, with 918 positives and 918 negatives. Now I'm showing 919 because that is what a neutron is. A neutron has one additional negative. Now, this is what's called electron flooding. The core is positive and it attracts negatives, and they become little bar magnets in a ball, and it is coated with electrons, which that nucleus will not allow any more electrons in, and they hang out in the orbital, and I will show you that. Okay, you should go up here on YouTube and look at this Latham's Crazy Machines Incredible Tractor Beam Magnet. Now I'm going to explain to you what he's got here. This is a positive core, just like I'm talking about in every nucleus, and electrons are compressing against it. Now, it's either this configuration for every nucleus, or it is a snowball configuration, still negative on its surface, basically coated, and no electrons will be allowed in, as you see. Here goes. Now he's allowing a boom, there it is, that's the tractor beam. Now that is quantum mechanics right there. The positive core is flooded with electrons, and it will not allow that new electrons to hit the core. Now what does that mean? What are we looking at here? This, he's just adding one, but depending upon the attractiveness of the core and the repulsiveness of the particles that surround it, you could have 1, 2, 50, 100 electrons surrounding that core, because the negativity of the core is going to be relational to the positiveness of the core, and the positiveness of the core is relational to the surrounding quantum orbitals. Now, if it's extremely positive in the core, you will have a ton of surrounding orbital electrons. Every electron is pulled to Earth with 1 electron volt, and every particle that's in the nucleus, which is a positive particle, is pushed away with 1 electron volt. What does that mean? Gravity and weight is excess electrons. I'm going to show you to you on a little graph. Okay, my friends, electron flood theory, what would change? What would change if it was correct? Which it is. The Bohr model goes completely, boop, done. There's 1836 bits in every proton, 1837 in every neutron, 1 in every electron. Half of the bits of the proton are negative, half are positive. In a neutron, half are positive, and half plus 1 are negative. So every nucleus will have an additional amount of negative particles. Every single nucleus. Not a single nucleus will be positive. Even in neutrality, it won't be positive. We'll always have a negative net negativity. Right? It was every single one, including hydrogen, all the way up. They have additional electrons because neutrons have additional electrons. Now, in the ring of orbital electrons, they will also have electrons. So what does that leave you with? You have a core of a certain number of protons and bits, certain number of proton bits. You will always have additional electron bits. I'm going to graph this out so you see it, but you're going to have a certain number of protons. You'll always have a certain extra number of electron bits, and then you'll have electrons in their orbital, which means the propensity of that molecule will always be excessive negativeness. That is what pulls it to Earth, because of the additional amount of electrons that are negatives. The Earth is positive. All electricity goes to Earth. electrons go to Earth, static goes to Earth, lightning goes to Earth, light goes to Earth. Anything that has electrons slams into the Earth, and it slams in with the number of excess electrons. Let's talk about that. All right, let's just go over these details very quickly. Light speed is variable. There is no such thing as the speed of light is set. The speed of light coming towards Earth is attracted to Earth because it's electron oriented, and it attracts towards Earth with the positiveness that the Earth pulls it by, not because of some set speed. If the Earth was bigger and had more positiveness, it would come faster. And that's what happens on Jupiter and all of the bigger planets. So they have just more pull. That's why things weigh more, because the electrons are being sucked to the positiveness of the spinning globe harder and harder as the more and more positiveness is there. Now, redshift is just light slowing down. Hubble was wrong. Einstein was wrong. Therefore, we don't have any idea where we are in space, because there might be a dense spot here and a very sparse spot here. This spot is shooting out light at a certain speed. This one's shooting out a speed. This is being pulled back because of a heavy amount of gravity. This is not being pulled back because of no real gravity, like, magnetic pull. So it's fast. This one's slow. We think that one's way far away because it's shifted. We think this one's very close. And they could be both totally in opposite directions of what we think. So we think everything's running away, and that's not the case. Now, there's no universal expansion. Now, protons are 1,836 bits. That got a little bit squished up, but that's 1,836 bits in a proton. 1837 in a neutron. I think I already went over this. 1 bit is upspin, 1 bit is downspin. So the electrons, positrons. Now, there's 918 of each. They're up and down. That's called electron flood theory. I'm going to show you what Rod captured in his venturi experiments. All right, I know people have very short attention spans, so I'm trying to overturn physics in a couple of minutes here. A little difficult. That's red light in a laser. That is the laser, same wave being accelerated due to the venturi, which is 2 round drums of steel. It forces just like a squirting out of a hose, and what it does then is it crushes these particles, and I will show you closely in a minute. What happens then is coming out from sprayed out here towards us. It creates Higgs fields after the bosons, which are the spinning charged particles. They call them charged particle carriers. So fast they have no time to interact, and bam, all of a sudden all of the free electrons that are in space, which is actually ether, and it exists, they collect on you as a static electricity. They discharge the ground. There's no question they are there, and anyway, they're there more in moist areas than in dry areas. But they collect on you, and they discharge the ground. Now, then these are the Higgs fields, which are the polarized electrons creating this as the spinning particle, which is this spinning particle sizzles through space. Those particles that it bangs into surround it and create a field. This is those fields, and this little tiny particle right here came off of this in a high, way up the top here. I have other shots of that, and it created this, which is smaller than light. This is the particles I'm talking about, the back-to-back particles. They come out, and I have more close-up shots of that. I'll have to show you. But they are back-to-back. If you have dark and light, that's positive and negative to me. Then you have positive and negative on the other side. This way, that way, this way, that way. It's a box of magnets. And here it is as it starts to compress, and then the next shot over here is flat as a pancake. I have all this in extreme detail. Rod worked with me on this for well over a year. And that was 3 years ago or 4 years ago. It's been a long time now. So this is not something that's new that I just all of a sudden jumped out. Ooh, look at all this. And I'm going to show you a bunch of other shots that are very, very, very hard to just ignore. red laser light, pulse laser. It looks like it's a whole bunch of things going on. There's a tiny little particle here, just like a jet, breaking the speed of light, creating these waves. And when it does, it concusses everything that's around it, and all of the electrons glow. That is their nature. I cannot explain it. But those are the little electrons that are in everything. They used to call it ether. Now you saw the wave. It's clearly accelerating, and you see that particle beam. I told you before, that particle is the only thing that's in that beam, but that particle owns a huge region around itself. Look up the 21 centimeter rule for hydrogen. Hydrogen itself influences 21 centimeters around itself. So these things, when they're flying through the air, these particles, they also have those same characteristics. A hydrogen is a very, very tiny particle. These are smaller than that, obviously, but they still maintain that same characteristic of a huge field around them that is influenced by this tiny, tiny, tiny particle. And if you can't see it, I don't know what else to say. It's a particle, and that's why you have this big beam. Now, you can see a reverse EMF field. If you can see that, I'm sure you can. I hope. Hold on, let me turn this light off. Maybe help to see better in this light. Now, these are the reverse waves shooting back, and then you have waves going this way. You see these? And then these are fighting each other. That's why they're glowing like hell here. They're trying to come this way. These are trying to go back. You got concussions going on all over the place here. But this is the killer. They're stacking up, see them? And they say, whoa, 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 whoa. And they say, hey, you got to wait your turn. I say, I'm not waiting. They crush each other in here. Then this is absolute negativeness. Positive comes back in here. I don't know how it separates. I cannot explain that. Like I said, this is something that really needs to be looked at. But you can see all of those little white particles. That is reverse concussion of those white particles are the ether. Right? They've always known about these. They call them luminescent corpuscles, and they were 100% right. Plato, my good friend. Now, let me show you what happens out of here. But first of all, this spray is not an interference pattern. That spray is a repulsion pattern. This is all negative particles. And then they turn into the positiveness, and they start adding together, and then they start separating themselves in these lines because of the negative polarity pushing strips away from each other. And the ones on the outside, they just go flying around until they somehow get reabsorbed. Now, this one here is deadly in my eyes. Those are those particles. So I'm going to say light is a particle. It's not a wave, it's a particle. It can accelerate. We saw it accelerated. It started out as light, as a wave of light, and accelerated, so that's acceleration, that's all. And they're particles, no question about that, and I will show them to you in a minute as they reform. Now, somehow they get broken in here. If you could see these little black dots, and here, look at that. You see that black round dot? I don't know, this is weird as hell. I can't explain it. And another one here, and another one here, and then they start to pull back into the light. But here, there is zero blackness, none, zero whatsoever, absolutely none. What does that tell me? I'm not sure, but I can tell you what I'm thinking is there's no positiveness in there. If the negative is white, and I'm going to go with negative as white, you can call it either way you want, but let's say negative is white. This is 100% negative plasma. Now that's interesting to me. And Rod said he could hear it sometimes sizzle, actually make sound, when he was adjusting and playing around with the venturi. And all this is there's a round pin here and a round pin here. That's all. That's all. He shoots the laser into it, and then when it forces itself like airplane wings and like a nozzle in a hose, and it has to accelerate. There's no other option. And when it does, the nature of these particles is not to be touching each other. If they are touching each other, they will compress, they will concuss, they will glow, they will luminesce, they will be energetic, and that is what you're seeing. Now, I don't know if we can utilize anything there, But I think there might be somewhere in a venturi with heavy particles instead of electrons, you might be able to get fusion for nothing. And chicks for free. Nah, actually, chicks are never free. Anyway, listen, here's the deal. I don't see why you can't get fusion. This is one side of the particles, and this is the other side. There's the dark blackness. Now, what did you want to do if you took your heliums, your big or your heavy hydrogens? They come in here, heavy duty, they slam into each other. They do this, and then you have all your little electrons here. And when they come out, they add back to these black ones, and instead of coming back to red light, which this does, it comes back to exactly what it was before. I can't explain that either, but it does. It comes back to red light. This would, they say, cascade back down to helium, which is the most stable of these particles when they come out, and then would have an excess of negative particles. And in my world, it's 20%. Increase in energy you're going to get out. So whatever comes in here, like five things come in here, 4 things go out, and the 5th one you can use as energy. But you have to have it in a vacuum chamber, and you have to use heavy particles, and you have to accelerate those, which I think you can do this with the accelerator right here. They can use their little they can shoot it up to like half the speed of light. I think they can get them up pretty fast in a very, very, very short period, within a small room, really. And then this does the job. Because all Rod did was use a regular laser light. It was coming through, it'd go nice, and it'd just keep going all by itself and having a good time until it hit this thing, and then bada bing. And this is bada boom. In between, it's plasma in my world. Okay, getting close to wrapping it up. You've got your positives and your negatives attached together in those particles. I think I already showed you. They're being attracted to Earth, which is a positive attractive source. Not 100% positive attractive, but positive attractive. Now, here's the calculation for gravity. Protons, you multiply every proton in the particular atom by 918 plus and 918 minus, and you carry it over here. Then you go to neutrons, 918 plus and 919 minus, and you carry it over there. So it leaves you 1 extra neutron. And then for in hydrogen, it's just a smidge. Has 1 extra electron, so you always have more negatives in the core than positives, so it's always net negative. So you're going to have always going to end up with an electrons. First of all, the total of the ones that are in the orbitals, you add that to the excess electrons here. That's gravity, and gravity equals the excess number of electrons times the pull factor. Now, what is the pull factor? The pull factor is how big the Earth is. The Earth is a pull factor of 1, let's say. Jupiter is a full pull factor of 5, whatever it is. The Sun is a pull factor of 100, 1,000, whatever. It's just a number of electrons more. So the pull factor, though, is very complicated because our Earth is being charged. It's actually spinning through space, and it has magnetic stripes in the ocean. As we spin through space with these stripes, that is identical to a motor. I rewound them. I know what they do. It spins through the magnetic particles that are in space as we scrub through space, spin, spin, spin. It's making our polar field, north and south. It's sucking electrons in and driving them out and around. So the Earth is a very complicated attractive source, but it is positive because the electrons are being pushed as they force themselves into the oncoming electrons, and it becomes a positive attractive source, and well, the North Pole. So the Earth in its entirety sucks electrons in. That's where the complicated part is, and that's the part that creates the excess in the gravity. But there is a negative component to Earth as well, and I can prove that. You say, oh, how can you say that? All electricity goes to Earth. No, not exactly. Not exactly. All right, I'm not going to get real complicated, but the Earth has not only a positive attractive source, it also has a lot of negatives on here. So they're pushing away, but the positive is much more intense than the negative. So these particles that are negative will sometimes, I mean, the particles that are on hydrogen and helium don't have enough negativeness. The positiveness is being pushed away, and the negativeness is not enough to pull down to that positive. Hydrogen and helium are not enough extra electrons, therefore they are anti-gravity. What's your anti-gravity? Alright, the Earth is not 100% positive. So there's your anti-gravity. And if you can move the electrons out of the S&P orbital, I think you can make anti-gravity, because I think Hutchinson did that. We're using frequencies and doing dragging out these angstrom unit frequencies, attenuating them, causing one to stabilize and setting up a wave and dragging it apart, doing something and removing electrons from the core, creating a negative, a positive core like hydrogen has. Hydrogen has a positive core compared to anything else, because it only has one extra little bitty piece in there that's negative. It's not enough to pull it to Earth. The Earth positiveness has more and pushes hydrogen away. Same thing with helium. I'll leave it at that.